The Galactic Council's emergency session chamber had never been so silent. 12 species, representing the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy, watched the holographic display with a mixture of disbelief and mounting concern. "Play it again," ordered High Counselor Vorax, his 4 eyes narrowing. The recording showed a vast section of the Orion defensive line, a network of automated fortifications that had stood unconquered for 3 centuries, reduced to floating debris. At the edge of the frame glided a single vessel of unfamiliar design, its hull bearing markings in a script none of the council members recognized. It destroyed 14 battle stations and disabled 3 Correxian dreadnoughts before disappearing into FTL, reported Admiral Talus, the weathered Proximan military advisor. No known species possesses such capabilities. "Not entirely true," interjected Delegate Morin, the Arcturian representative, her luminescent skin pulsed with anxiety patterns. "Intelligence suggests this is humanity's first venture beyond their quarantine zone." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Humans were known only through distant observation and limited probe data. The species had been deemed too volatile for contact after their early detection 5 decades ago, when Council observers noted their rapid technological progression and concerning propensity for internal conflict. "Impossible," scoffed Delegate Ixos of the Rigelian Compact. "The containment field around Sol system is impenetrable. No primitive species could bypass such technology." And yet, Vorax gestured to the hologram. "Evidence suggests otherwise." The doors to the chamber slid open, admitting a figure in the simple gray robes of the diplomatic corps. Ambassador Lena, one of the few individuals who had dedicated her career to studying human behavior from afar, approached the central platform. "The humans call it the Thunder Child," she announced without preamble. "They've known about us for years and have been preparing. This vessel wasn't meant to attack the defensive line. It was an assessment. They were measuring our capabilities." "How would you know this?" demanded Exus. "Because they've made contact." Lena activated her own data feed, displaying a formal communication request transmitted in perfect council standard. "They're requesting diplomatic recognition and the cessation of what they call the illegal quarantine of Earth and her colonies." "Preposterous." Ixus slammed his appendage against the table. "We should mobilize the combined fleet immediately." "To what end?" countered Admiral Talus. "If one ship can do this." He gestured at the destruction displayed. "What might a fleet accomplish?" High Counselor Vorax raised his hand for silence. "Ambassador Lena, your assessment." "We've severely underestimated them," she replied. "While we watched from a distance, they deduced our presence, reverse-engineered aspects of our technology from salvaged probe components, and developed countermeasures to our most sophisticated systems." "What do they want?" asked Morin. "The same as any intelligent species," Lena replied. "Recognition, respect, a place in the galactic community. But they've chosen to approach from a position of strength rather than supplication. A dangerous precedent," muttered Ixos. "Indeed," agreed Vorax, "but perhaps a necessary recalibration of our approach." He turned to the council. "We have maintained our dominance through technological superiority for millennia. For the first time in living memory, that advantage is threatened. We must understand how." The council chamber erupted in overlapping discussions as the hologram continued to play on loop, a single human warship gliding silently through the wreckage of what had been considered impregnable defenses, heralding the arrival of a power none had anticipated. Captain Marcus Reed stood on the observation deck of the Thunderchild, gazing at the massive Galactic Council station that hung against the backdrop of an unfamiliar nebula. After decades of preparation, humanity had finally secured a meeting with the powers that had sought to contain them. Impressive, isn't it? Commander Avatores joined him at the viewport. All those species working together, building something that massive. And yet they feared us enough to try keeping us imprisoned in our own system, Reed replied, his voice carrying the measured calm that had made him the natural choice to command humanity's first deep space warship. Admiral Jackson's voice came through the ship's comms. "Captain, the Council's inspection team has arrived in Hangar 2. They're particularly interested in our propulsion and weapon systems." Reed nodded. "Let's give them the tour they requested." Tactical restraint protocols in effect. As Reed made his way through the gleaming corridors of the Thunderchild, he reflected on what made the vessel so revolutionary. Unlike the Council species who had developed their technologies in a relatively linear progression over thousands of years, humanity had been forced to innovate under pressure, knowing they were being watched by advanced civilizations. The inspection team consisted of 5 aliens representing the dominant Council species. Their chief engineer, a tall, spindly being named Krev, couldn't disguise his fascination as Reed led them through the engine room. "Your FTL system doesn't utilize dimensional folding or tachyon manipulation," Krev observed, studying the massive rings that powered the ship's faster-than-light capabilities. "How do you achieve superluminal travel?" "We call it the Hawking Drive," Reed explained. "It creates a localized distortion in the quantum foam structure of spacetime, essentially surfing the resulting wave." "Theoretically impossible," muttered one of the other inspectors. "So we were told," Reed replied with a slight smile. Our physicists disagreed. The military representative, Admiral Tallis, studied the weapon emplacements with professional interest. "These don't appear to be energy-based weapons." "They're not," confirmed Commander Torres. "We call them gravitic lances. They temporarily increase the fundamental gravitational constant within a narrowly defined spatial cone." Tallis's expression shifted to one of genuine alarm. "You're weaponizing the laws of physics." "We're applying them creatively," Torres corrected. "The effect is temporary, but rather effective against conventional shields, which are designed to deflect energy, not alterations in physical constants." The Council representatives exchanged troubled glances as they continued their inspection. What disturbed them wasn't just the technological innovations, but the philosophical approach behind them. Every Council species had developed technologies by building upon established principles. Humans, by contrast, seemed to question the very foundations of those principles. In the tactical center, Reed demonstrated the ship's most significant advancement. Our ODIN system, Omnidirectional Defense Intelligence Network, coordinates all ship functions through a hybridized AI/human interface, he explained. "It doesn't just react to threats, it anticipates them through probability mapping." "You trust machines with such authority?" asked Krev, clearly troubled. "We trust the partnership between human intuition and computational power," Reed clarified. "Neither alone would be sufficient." As the inspection concluded, the Council representatives gathered in the conference room, their discomfort evident. "Your ship violates several technological development protocols established by the Galactic Council," stated their diplomatic representative. "Protocols established without our knowledge or consent," Reed countered. "Humanity developed in isolation, unaware of your constraints. We followed the paths that made sense to us." "That's precisely what concerns us," admitted Tallis. "Your species thinks differently. You approach problems from unexpected angles." Reed nodded. "It's called innovation, Admiral. And it's how we survived on a planet that tried to kill us for millennia before we reached the stars." As the inspection team departed, Commander Torres joined Reed at the viewport again. "They're afraid of us," she observed. "Not of our weapons," Reed replied. "Of our ideas. The Thunderchild isn't just a warship. It's a statement that humanity won't be bound by limitations imposed by others." He turned from the viewport. "And that, Commander, is why this human warship is different." Grand Admiral Alyssa Mercer addressed the Joint Chiefs of Earth's Defense Force from aboard the Thunderchild, her hologram projected simultaneously to military commands across 7 human colonies. "The Council's response was exactly as anticipated," she reported. "Initial fear, followed by diplomatic overtures aimed at containment through regulation rather than physical barriers." General Hayes, representing Mars Command, leaned forward. "And our counterproposal?" "Delivered and under consideration," Mercer replied. We've made it clear that while we seek peaceful integration into the galactic community, we will not accept second-class status or technological restrictions. The revelation of the Thunderchild's capabilities had sent shockwaves through the established power structures of the galaxy. What the Council species failed to fully grasp was that the vessel represented only a fraction of humanity's innovation, a deliberate display calibrated to demonstrate potential without revealing all their advancements. The strategic landscape has fundamentally shifted, continued Mercer. For centuries, the Council maintained stability through technological monopoly. Our emergence has disrupted that balance. Across 50 light-years, the repercussions were already evident. Smaller, non-Council species had begun reaching out to Earth through covert channels, seeking alliances. 3 previously subjugated civilizations had declared independence from their Council protectors, citing humanity as inspiration. "We've become a symbol," noted Admiral Reyes from Europa Station, "whether we intended it or not." "Perhaps that's our most powerful weapon," suggested Hayes. "Not our technology, but what we represent. The possibility of advancement outside Council constraints." The Thunderchild had demonstrated more than military capabilities. It had exposed the inherent flaws in the Council's governance model. Their 1,000-year technological stagnation wasn't an inevitable plateau, as they had claimed, but the result of deliberate suppression to maintain the status quo. "They've requested detailed schematics of our gravity lance technology," Mercer informed the group, "in exchange for safety certification and integration permits." "Industrial espionage by another name," muttered Hayes. "Precisely why we've counter-offered with our shared innovation protocol," said Mercer. "Any technology exchange must be made available to all spacefaring species, not hoarded by the Council leadership." This proposal had thrown the Council into disarray. The dominant species had long maintained their positions by selectively distributing technologies to allies, while withholding them from potential rivals. Humanity's insistence on technological democratization threatened the very foundation of their power structure. Meanwhile, human diplomatic and military vessels had begun moving through Council space with calculated precision, establishing a presence at key strategic locations, not as an occupying force, but as a demonstration that the quarantine was irreversibly broken. "The Thunderchild wasn't just a single ship," explained Mercer, pulling up a galactic map showing human vessel movements. "It was the first move in a larger strategic positioning. We're establishing ourselves as a distributed power rather than a centralized one, harder to contain, harder to neutralize." This approach stood in stark contrast to Council military doctrine, which relied on concentrated force projection from established bases. Humanity's distributed, asymmetric strategy had no clear counter in their tactical manuals. 4 Council member species have already approached us about bilateral agreements outside the Council framework, Mercer continued. The Arcturians and Proximans in particular seem eager to establish independent relations. The implications were clear. The monolithic power structure that had governed galactic affairs for millennia was fracturing along its existing fault lines, catalyzed by humanity's emergence. "We didn't set out to dismantle their system," observed Hayes. "Perhaps not," replied Mercer, "but we've introduced a level of change and adaptation they haven't faced in generations." The Thunderchild showed them that their technological plateau wasn't a natural limit, but a self-imposed one. Some species find that revelation liberating. Others find it terrifying. As the meeting concluded, the strategic reality was evident to all present. Humanity had achieved in weeks what military planners had projected might take decades: recognition as a major power and the beginning of a fundamental restructuring of galactic politics. Not through conquest, but through innovation. Not by destroying the existing order, but by demonstrating that alternatives were possible. And it had begun with a single warship that dared to be different. Professor Alan Drake, Earth's foremost cynoanthropologist, stood before the mixed audience of humans and Council species representatives in the Grand Lecture Hall of the newly established Galactic Cultural Exchange Center on Luna. To understand why the Thunderchild represents such a paradigm shift, he began, we must examine not just its technical specifications, but the cultural framework that produced it. The holographic display behind him showed images of Earth's history, cave paintings beside space stations, ancient pottery alongside quantum computers. Unlike many council species, human development was not linear, Drake explained. We experienced periods of rapid advancement followed by dark ages, knowledge gained and lost, then rediscovered. This cycle created a unique approach to innovation, one that questions assumptions rather than building exclusively upon them. In the 3 months since the Thunderchild's dramatic entrance onto the galactic stage, Council researchers have been struggling to comprehend the seemingly contradictory nature of human society. A species capable of remarkable technological achievements, yet still preserving ancient traditions. A civilization that produced both poetry and planet-cracking weaponry. Humans don't separate technology from culture, Drake continued. Each influences the other in continuous feedback loops. The Thunderchild isn't just a product of engineering brilliance. It's the manifestation of cultural values. Krev, the council engineer who had first inspected the vessel, raised an appendage to ask a question. Yet your species seems to have no technological taboos. You pursue advancements that most civilizations agreed were too dangerous millennia ago. Drake nodded. We have different risk assessment frameworks. Where council species prioritize stability and predictability, humans often value potential benefits over potential risks. We ask not just, is it dangerous, but what might we learn? This philosophical difference explained much about the Thunderchild's design. Its talking drive emerged from theoretical physics that council scientists had abandoned as too unstable for practical application. Its ODIN system integrated AI in ways that crossed council prohibitions established after the machine rebellions of their early interstellar period. But perhaps most significant, Drake continued, is our collaborative approach to innovation. The Thunderchild wasn't designed by a single specialist group, but through cross-disciplinary teams where artists worked alongside engineers, historians with physicists, philosophers with weapons designers. He displayed the vessel's engine room, highlighting the flowing, almost organic design of the propulsion system. Note how the Hawking drive incorporates biomimetic principles. Its efficiency comes not from brute force, but from elegance, an approach borrowed from evolutionary biology rather than traditional engineering. Ambassador Lena, who had dedicated her career to understanding humans, added her perspective. What council species find most disorienting is your integration of seemingly contradictory elements. Your ship carries both advanced weaponry and extensive diplomatic facilities. Your crew includes both military personnel and cultural specialists. Because we don't see them as contradictory, explained Captain Reed, who had joined the panel. Strength and diplomacy are complementary tools. Art and science inform each other. The Thunderchild reflects this holistic approach. This integration extended to every aspect of the vessel. Its life support systems incorporated techniques developed by agricultural scientists studying closed ecosystems. Its navigation algorithms drew on neural network principles inspired by marine biologists, studying how fish schools coordinate movement. We call it convergent innovation, Drake explained, allowing knowledge from disparate fields to cross-pollinate, creating solutions that specialized approaches might miss. The implications extended far beyond military applications. Already, several council worlds have begun cautiously implementing human educational approaches that emphasized creative problem-solving and cross-disciplinary learning rather than rigid specialization. The Thunderchild isn't revolutionary because its weapons are more powerful, concluded Drake. It's revolutionary because it represents a fundamentally different approach to knowledge itself, one that sees boundaries between disciplines as opportunities for innovation rather than limiting factors. As the lecture concluded, the audience remained abuzz with discussion. Council representatives struggled to reconcile this new understanding with millennia of institutional knowledge. Many found it deeply unsettling. Others, particularly younger members of their species, found it exhilarating. 5 years after the Thunder Child's historic emergence, High Counselor Vorax stood before the expanded Galactic Council. Where once 12 species had dictated the fate of the galaxy, now 37 independent civilizations were represented, including humanity. As we conclude the ratification of the new Galactic Charter, Vorax announced, his voice carrying the weight of history, "We acknowledge that we stand at the beginning of a transformed era, one that none could have predicted when a single human warship appeared at our borders." The chamber, redesigned to accommodate the new members, bore little resemblance to the hierarchical structure of the old council. Gone were the elevated positions for founding species. In their place stood a circular arrangement that placed all representatives on equal footing, a design insisted upon by the human delegation and enthusiastically supported by newly liberated species. The integration of humanity into our community has not been without challenges, Vorax continued. Their questioning of established protocols, their insistence on technological transparency, their seemingly paradoxical embrace of both tradition and innovation, all have forced us to re-examine foundations we believed immutable. Captain Reed, now Admiral Reed, sat among the human delegation, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The Thunder Child had been only the beginning. Its successor vessels had further demonstrated humanity's unique approach, each incorporating lessons learned through open exchange with former Council species. More significant than the military balance of power, however, was the philosophical shift that had occurred. The rigid stratification that had defined galactic society for millennia had given way to a more dynamic, adaptive model, one that valued innovation over stability, diversity over uniformity. The Humanity Protocol, as it has come to be known, continued Vorax, has been fully implemented across 17 major technological sectors. The results speak for themselves. Advancements in medical science, energy production, and computational systems that surpass anything achieved in the previous 5 centuries of Council guidance. What Vorax didn't mention, though everyone present understood, was that these advancements had occurred precisely because the Council's careful control had been dismantled. By insisting that technological developments be shared rather than hoarded, humanity had catalyzed a renaissance across multiple fields. "We formally recognize that the era of technological sequestration has ended," Vorax declared. "In its place, we embrace the principles of collaborative innovation that have proven so effective in this brief but transformative period." For some of the original Council species, this transition had been painful. Those who had built their power on monopolized knowledge found themselves suddenly competing in a more open environment. Others, however, discovered new potential when freed from constraints. Perhaps most remarkably, noted Ambassador Lena, now serving as the head of the newly formed Cultural Integration Commission, is how humanity has influenced our social structures as much as our technological ones. The human concept of meritocracy, advancement based on demonstrated ability rather than species or origin, has revolutionized governance models across the galaxy. The Thunder Child itself had been decommissioned the previous year, transformed into a museum and educational center. Millions of beings from across the galaxy had visited, studying not just its technical innovations, but the cultural and philosophical principles it embodied. We stand now at the threshold of what historians are already calling the Second Galactic Enlightenment, concluded Vorax. A period defined not by the dominance of any single approach, but by the dynamic integration of diverse perspectives. As the session adjourned, Admiral Reed found himself approached by a young Rigelian, a member of a species that had initially been among humanity's most vehement opponents. "My research team has been studying your early space programs," the Rigelian said. "Particularly fascinating is how you achieved your first lunar landing with such primitive technology." Reed smiled. "Necessity and determination can overcome many limitations. That is the lesson your species has taught us," the Rigelian acknowledged. "That barriers exist primarily in our perception of what is possible." As Reed gazed around the chamber at the diverse gathering of species, some physically incomprehensible to human senses, others surprisingly familiar despite evolving light years from Earth, He reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. It had begun with a single warship designed to demonstrate humanity's potential and secure their place among the stars. Yet its greatest impact had not come from its weapons or defenses, but from the ideas it represented, the possibility of a different approach, a different future. The Thunder Child had been different not because of what it could destroy, but because of what it could create. A new understanding of what was possible when innovation was valued over tradition, cooperation over dominance, diversity over uniformity. And in that difference lay the seeds of a transformed galaxy.